There has been some prickling online from supporters of the ostrich farm saying, hey, we haven't heard enough from conservative MPs. And then conservative MPs did start speaking out about it. But they're saying we haven't heard enough from Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the official opposition, on this issue when, he talks about things like the gun grab, which is also a property rights issue. Uh, I'll go to Stockwell Day because he's been in this exact position before, so I feel like you have some insights into this. Should
Well,
Pierre Poilievre be speaking out more? And if he should, why hasn't he?
well, he has started to. And first, just let me sidetrack for a second, saying it's my honor to be on the show with you folks. And as you know, Ezra and I go back quite a ways. He even worked for me a million years ago before electricity was invented. And just a shout out to Rebel because I'm sure your viewers know this. Rebel sticks on stories that other mainstream media outlets won't, and actually eventually almost forces them to do it because you get so much response and reaction going. So good for you to not be afraid to tackle the stories that others are nervous about or just not wanting to. And as far as Pierre, and actually Pierre Poilievre used to work for me too, that's no secret. So between Pierre and Ezra, I'm sure there's discussions from time to time that go on. As an opposition leader, and I can tell you by experience, you are flooded daily with the stories that you should be hitting daily, and then the longer term ones. And you've got a circle of advisors around you. Some of them are good, some not so good. All of them are cautious, I can tell you. And it's one of the things that's a bit infuriating because you get to become the leader of a party through, hard work and good support from people, and then you find yourself in kind of a new arena where we used to call it, the kids with the short pants are running around and telling you what you should be saying and what you shouldn't. Having said that, Pierre Poilievre does not worry about speaking up on issues. I think he's proven his mettle on that time and time again, and even at times paid a price for it. So all I can say is I think you'll be hearing more. I have seen some recent commenting, and he's quite rightly talking about the giant bureaucratic effect of what's going on this ostrich farm story. So my prediction, and I'm not calling him to tell him to talk more about it, is that you'll be hearing more on this because it's just picking up steam. And again, thanks to a lot of the work that's been done by Rebel on this.
Well, I appreciate those kind words. I mean, even if you don't care about ostriches, and I know the ostrich people get mad at me because I don't really, but I care about property rights. I'm a farmer. I just don't like birds, and bigger birds are also scare me. But I'm a farmer, and I feel like this is a property rights issue. It's a government overreach issue, and I don't think that anybody has been given due process here. That they can just come and kill these birds without ever having to prove that there's any sort of benefit to exterminating them in the interests of public health. Um, Keith, you're a advocate for property rights. I think that's important. An important point is okay. So look at these birds; they frighten me to no end. But I would not want the government showing up to do this to a cattle farmer. I wouldn't want them to do it to a lamb producer over something like scrapie. The government should be forced to show its work, and right now that is not the case.
Well, what you might not be aware is back in 2003, I actually represented the cattle industry during the mad cow outbreak and was in all the operation centers on the trace out and dealt extensively with all levels of CFIA and their command center. And then in 2009, I had my second go around with CFIA when I represented the the patient zero farm in Alberta, which was for the zootonic transmission of H1N1, when we had that small pandemic where a Mexican farm worker came out of Mexico, went to work on my client's farm, got the hogs sick, and then the hogs got my clients and their kids sick. So I've dealt with CFIA in these call situations before, and they definitely come in with an arbitrary and iron foot type approach, and let's kill everything in sight. They are tough to deal with. And unfortunately for the farmers, our courts are so deferential to the decision making of CFIA and government officials generally that some of those remedies are limited. That all said, I still think it was open. I was puzzled by the silence from Poilievre. I couldn't figure it out. A lot of times I see when politicians do things because of my background, I go, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. That's counterintuitive, but that's what I would recommend as well. This one I didn't get. I'm glad that he may be speaking out now because I think the points on which he could emphasize is a concern about government overreach and a lack of collaboration or working with the farmers to find the least harmful outcomes. So I think that would be a safe message for him, and hopefully we'll hear more.
If I can just jump in on Keith's
Sure.
good comment there. And Keith, thanks. The work you've done over the years on these type of issues is just stellar. And there's less and less being done on it. We should be aware, I just saw a number, I think it was 860. Or it might be 680, so don't quote me, but it's in the 600 to 800 figure. That's the number of judges that have been appointed by either Justin Trudeau or Mark Carney. That's a huge number of judges who would be appointed, who take let's face it, and let's say I'm willing to debate it, a culturally Marxist view of the universe, which is that government tends to be right all the time, and decisions should be made by a select few people. Having said that, it's interesting what the government's not willing to do, because there's been at least two cases. One is the lab in Vancouver, which you're probably aware of, which has said, listen, send us any of the samples, as many as you want, of the blood or whatever you take samples. We'll look at them for you, and we will, identify them. They do this work worldwide. And the government has said to the ostrich farm owners, you will face fines and possible jail if you do that. So a crazy reaction. And then, and again, we can understand this next one, an offer from the United States now, albeit it's from their health department and RFK Jr., but they're saying, listen, at no cost to you, we'd be willing to take all the birds and we will do research on them, because we may have a different view than CFIA. So you've had at least two offers here. The government has said, no, that's illegal. We only want to kill them. The shots that we see on camera of sometimes it's RCMP officers, and I used to be head of the RCMP in terms of Minister of Public Safety, so my heart goes out to RCMP members. I don't think they love these kind of details, but when you see them with hazmat suits climbing up poles to cover the cameras that the farm has for security purposes, this is completely unhinged. And I'm taking it to the level of challenging Prime Minister Carney, asking him to look into this. Why the terror? Why are you refusing any other rational approach? You just seem to want to kill. It's unhinged.
Well,
That's right.
Sorry, go ahead, Lise, please. No.
Well, this is an institutional failure that we're witnessing in real time. And I think something that Stockwell Day just said about Pierre Poilievre's advisors is really pertinent in this situation. He's got a bubble around him of people who are not responsive to emerging trends. When you've got a story, when you've got a global story this big, an institutional failure on the scale of the CFIA, who, P.S., I just want to reiterate, has spent the last 5 years developing an extensive and strategic DEI plan. Okay, Pierre Poilievre, if he is the prime minister in waiting, he has got to become more responsive to these types of stories. They are so slow on their feet in Ottawa. They are in such a secluded bubble that it shouldn't take the entire Conservative base screaming at them to get involved for them to get involved. They should be able to identify which way the wind is blowing and lead the parade. Remember, what did Ralph Klein used to say, Sheila Gunn Reid?
Oh, show me the parade that's marching and I'll jump in front of it and lead it.
Conservatives.
Here we are.
Conservatives, get on this.
Hey, Toronto Rebel News fans, listen up. Rebel News is celebrating 10 years of fearless journalism with our 10th birthday bash, and you're invited to join us. Last week, hundreds of Rebel fans packed our Calgary party for an unforgettable night of music, food, and fun. Now it's Toronto's turn. Join us on Thursday, October 16th at 6 p.m. near Black Creek and Lawrence for a night you will not forget. Expect a lively evening with Rebel News journalists and crew, past and present, cocktails, hors d'oeuvres, and of course, a birthday cake.
Happy birthday, Rebel. Happy birthday. Happy 10 years, Rebel. There you go. That's what we're talking about.
You know, and I have to tell you, Stockwell is so right when he says, you know, that this is with regard to the police there. It's very clear that they don't want to be there. And just in my experience in my 3 days at Ostrichapalooza, which is really what it is there, nobody actually thinks that those ostriches are dangerous to the public health. Cops are standing around like that. They're leaning on the fence for these deadly disease vectors are supposed to be penned up. They're letting the protesters feed the birds, put their hands into the fence. Nobody thinks that these ostriches are any sort of radical disease vector that pose any sort of dangerous risk to the public or the poultry industry. I just want to point out, we talked about institutional failures, and this isn't on the list of things to talk about, but I want to go to it because I watch committee meetings in the House of Commons. I do it for fun, but also sometimes for work. And I caught the CFIA, head of the CFIA was testifying. John Barlow asked a great question. John Barlow is a Conservative MP from Alberta. I think he's our ag critic, and he's great at this. And this is something, if you weren't paying attention, it would just fly right by. Olivia, I put it in the chat. There is very little oversight to decision-making at the CFIA. In fact, they eliminated the position that would be akin to the ombudsman after many of the complaints against the CFIA, almost a third of them, by the way, were found to be founded, and they resulted in reversals. And so what did the Liberals do? They just eliminated that position. Instead of saying, we've got an institutional problem here, we're making decisions that, as it turns out, are wrong. What are we going to do about it? You know, we'll just get rid of the guy who's hearing the complaints. Watch this.
And I would ask Mr. Iannarro, and thank you for your answers, if you would also table with the committee, we had known that with the chief redress officer as part of the CFIA was a very critical office that was eliminated by the Liberal government. And we know that almost 27% or well over a quarter of all the complaints brought in by customers and producers and businesses to the CFIA were justified, and many of those decisions had to be reversed. Can you table with this committee an updated report on how many CFIA complaints were received since 2015 to present, broken down by subject matter, by province, and the outcome of those complaints? That would be very helpful to this report as well. And I would ask...
So that was a quick thing. It just went by. He's asking for them to table evidence. But did you know that they got rid of the chief redress officer at the CFIA, the person who would be, I guess, as unbiased as you would think somebody working in the federal government would be to deal with these complaints? I had no idea that there was nobody there that you could complain to about your treatment at the hands of the CFIA, but it's gone. It's gone. Anybody can jump in.
Well, there has to be within government a responsive system where you are open to, and this goes broader even on this question, to other significant parts of a debate. Again, Pierre Poilievre is quite good at bringing up the other side on these. And I didn't want to necessarily take a shot at his advisors. I'm just saying you get hypersensitive, you know, and everybody around you saying, don't say this, don't say that. I think his record's pretty strong that he's not afraid to address those issues. But what's happening and why you're having a lot of the unrest among just the population in general, and even anger, if people don't sense they're at least getting their view on the table and it's getting some, you know, decent, respectful consideration, people start to get angry. That's where it starts to break down. So when you have a different opposing medical view or an opposing scientific view, it needs to be aired or people will feed into, you know, you might call it a conspiracy theory, but you know what's bubbling up, and I'll say the thing out loud that nobody wants to say, other than maybe you folks. The whole issue or a lot of this fear goes to, well, what if the birds are researched? What if they do test them? What if it's found out that in fact they're not sick? What if it is found out that in fact they did develop herd immunity as it's known, where something can hit a population, human or animal of another type, and some people initially die, and then there's a real rejuvenation, a natural boost, you could say, on the immunization side. So that's where the conspiracy is bubbling up. People are saying, is CFIA afraid of that? And governments, when they want to clamp down, they want to look like they're unmoving, they will always fall back and play the safety card. It's about your safety. It's about public safety. That goes as far back as as the French Revolution, when Robespierre was canceling people in the public square, and he had a unique way of doing that. As you know, it had something to do with losing their heads. He made himself the head of the Committee on Public Safety. That's what he called himself. It gave him the right to exterminate any other point of view. So I'm saying to Prime Minister Carney and to the federal Liberals, you have to, a lot like questions from that MP, you have to allow different points of view. Otherwise, it does look like a cover-up, and everybody's going to get hurt in that process.
Well, I've seen this evolution of what we've experienced in Canada. It's very disturbing. Everything's becoming tribal, and part of the Liberal government's sort of view of the world is that bureaucrats are, I'm going to overstate it to make my point, they're all knowing, all seeing, filled with truth, beauty, and goodness, and infallible. And they've expanded the bureaucracy, but they've also significantly expanded and continue to, when you talk about free speech things that I'm sure will come up later, expand powers. And so removing an accountability mechanism from the CFIA, given their broad discretionary powers, is part of this overall trend where we're seeing government get more powerful. But there's a huge ideological divide in our country where there are many people that are very comfortable with this and think it's a very proper role for government, and they have this blind trust that bureaucrats are all knowing and all seeing. So, we're in interesting times, and looks like the trend line is not one for optimism.
Yeah,
I would agree. I would agree. Let me just take a chapter from the book of the government of Japan after the terrible earthquake that took place there, 2011, the Tohoku earthquake, and then there was the problem with the nuclear plant in Fukushima. The government of Japan was even under international scrutiny, saying, "Are you doing enough? Did you have the right systems in place? How was your follow-up?" And you know what they did? They invited not just myself, but I was one person who was invited to go to Japan and spend a week there and meet with all the officials, any level, go into any department, ask any question, talk about any system that might have been working or not working. And they were saying, please take a look and tell us how we could have handled this better. Can you see a government approach from that in Canada, where the government, let's say the CFIA would say, you know what, we're willing to take input, we're willing to be challenged. How could we have done this better? So that by taking an approach like that, you actually calm people down. Then you don't have revolution in the streets, but you promote, I'm saying this carefully, you promote, let's say, provocative actions by appearing not to listen to anybody else. So Keith's quite right, and I just agree with him wholeheartedly on that.
Yeah.
Let me give you a little vignette of what happened, for example, when I was dealing with the CFIA during H1N1 in 2009. And they were treating me and my clients like we were gnats, like just completely unresponsive. And after I triggered front page news coverage across the country back in the old day when we actually had reporters and journalists, it caused a meeting in Red Deer, Alberta, with all of these officials. And they were just going through the paces of meeting with me, the representative of this farm family that was in this terrible state of distress, being patient zero for the start of what was feared to be the pandemic. And back then I had a BlackBerry and I left it on vibrate. And throughout the meeting, it kept vibrating. And because it was all the reporters calling, trying to figure out what was going on and wanting to get a scoop on the story. And I intentionally ignored it. Like they all kept looking at it and I pretended like I couldn't hear it. And they completely blew me off for the entire meeting. And they were all packing up to leave. And then I said, oh, it looks like the media has been calling me. What should I tell them? They all opened up their books again and sat down, and they started to listen to me. And that's part of the problem we have now, is that I can't do that because, even when I came back from the Freedom Convoy, representing that situation, and I gave I think it was a Globe and Mail reporter, like an hour and a half. I let him ask me anything he wanted. And I said to him at the end, I said, you're not going to be able to do a story on this. He's like, no, I want to. I said, no, I know you want to, but because what I'm telling you is going to make the government look bad, your editors aren't going to let you publish it, or they're going to cut it, because they're going to look at you straight in the face and say, here's the choice. We either run the story and we get budget cuts, we let you go, you don't pay your mortgage because the government's going to be mad at us, they fund us now, or we don't run the story. They never ran the story. So again, this is part of the importance of Rebel News and the social media, but also how we've lost some of the tools that many of us use, elected officials and non, to keep accountability and keep the systems working in an efficient and fair way.
By connecting job seekers to work simulation and training, Work First Alberta helps people change their story